Hi everybody, it's my pleasure to be here and to see so many faces, so thank you so much for coming here today. This is a public meeting with a rather packed agenda, which you probably won't be able to read very well. It's intentional. You've all received that if you're on the mailing list, and we will recirculate that afterwards with a couple of slides. So there are a few things that I need to make sure that we basically cover before we make a start. And a few what I would call house rules. So let me start with those, and then that will be helping. So my name is Henri Winand. I've been in the UK since the late 80s. I've been married now to an English rose for about 30 years. I've been in the local area for a long time. And otherwise, other being a businessman, an entrepreneur, I'm also happening to be a volunteer for the StopTheNewTown.org, or STNT for short. So let's have a look at the house rules in their own rights. So the first thing is it's organised by a bunch of volunteers. We're all local residents from Oadby and Great Glen, Stretton Hall, Kibworth, Willoughby District and beyond. So this is really the whole local area. We are not a political group in any way, shape or form. And we aim to show why none of us are neither NIMBYs, I'm sure you've heard what NIMBYs are, but I don't know if you know what bananas are, which is absolutely nothing anywhere near at all. So, you know, I go always to make sure that we inform people and that you are all equipped to understand what decision you make on whether or not this strategic site around the Great Glen area and what is now known as south of Gartree Road is going ahead. So before we dive in, I would like to make a few thanks. The first one is to the staff and the school, Leicester Grammar School. They are here to provide a service to the local community and by allowing us to rent their facilities and also by, this is out of term time, so staff have actually come out to help us in their own time, which is fantastic. They are not taking any side, either for or against. They are here to help the local community to make decisions. All volunteers have been contributing their times. Sometimes I have to say their fingers as well. I don't know, but leafleting more than 4,000 leaflets. Some of the letterboxes I have to say are guillotine, so it sounds very French. Anyway, moving forward, so also thank those who've contributed with cash. Drone photography, leaflets, and websites and everything else is not for free. We have a link on the website for those who would like to donate. And then I would also like to thank all those that I've forgotten to mention, which I'm sure I have done so. I was told many years ago that short pencils, that's a long memory, and I don't see my pencil, so I made my notes here. So why are we here? We are here for residents to have the information to make an informed decision on the proposed Harborough District Council local plan, and also to that extent the Oadby and Great Glen local plan, because of course the site is actually a joint effort between around up to 4,000 on this side, 2,000 on the other side over time, of course, as David will explain in a few minutes. So, what I would like to make sure is that there are a few rules of engagement. And the reason for that is what we're going to talk about impacts people's livelihoods. Flood, traffic, air quality, value of your house and beyond can be quite emotional things. And I'm sure that all of us would want to make sure that we remain civilized throughout, that we are never personal, always courteous. I was always told that when I was at school many years ago, as you can see, that's long gone. And we'll make sure that we stick to timing. So we have our little green and red things here, which once it's green is good, person can talk. Once it goes amber, it's a reminder that it's towards the end of the slot. And when it goes red, that's 15 seconds before the end. So we will stick to timing. Now, if for whatever reason questions that you have not been asked or answered, because there are lots of them, then please do make sure you submit them onto the StopTheNewTown.org. There is an email facility there. Now, I remind you that all of us are volunteers. We will try to find the answer. If we can't find the answer, we'll let you know. If we can't find the answer, we'll point you to the information. But it may not be immediate, but we will make sure that it's happening as soon as we can. Now, final thing to actually mention in terms of the short-term goals, and this is really the aim of having this meeting about 1 month or so or thereabout before the deadline of the 6th of May at 9 a.m. And actually I would say the 2nd of May ideally, you will submit your contribution to Harborough District Council, bearing in mind that the 5th is a bank holiday and therefore most people will probably play cricket or be somewhere with weather's not nice for that weekend. Now, having a simple no, I don't agree, or having an email venting at your local councillor saying I don't like it, etc., will carry very little to no weight with the planning inspectorate. That's the people that we need to convince that whether it's a good idea or it's a bad idea to do this strategic site here. So that's very important for us to consider. Now, final point to make. Late this afternoon, I've received a note from the Chief Executive of the Harborough District Council, John Richardson, and he has asked me to read the following statement at the start of the meeting. To confirm and explain that Harborough District Council and their councillors are currently in a pre-election period for the Leicestershire County Council election on Thursday the 1st of May. Due to this, councillors have been advised not to attend this meeting and participate in order to comply with the pre-election statutory guidance and codes relating to publicity and use of council resources. I can assure everyone here tonight that Councillor Simon Gorton, portfolio holder for planning, was willing to attend and present the plan had it not been for the advice given to him as mentioned earlier. Likewise, the leader of the council, Councillor Knowles and Councillor King, would have also attended and participated in the discussions and the meeting had it been held outside of the election period. However, Harborough District Council's Director of Planning, David Atkinson, who is here with us, is in attendance to give us an overview tonight. Please note that David Atkinson will be giving a factual presentation on the draft local plan and will answer a small number of any immediate questions based on clarification relating to this, his presentation, and he will then leave the meeting. Again, this is due to Council and Officers' protocol during pre-election period. Harborough District Council continues to welcome your comments and questions through the formal consultation process, which is open until 9 a.m. on the 6th of May 2025. 9 a.m. That's it. Right. Now, what we also note as stopthenewtime.org is our invitation to Councillor Gorton was issued on 27th of March, responded positively on the 2nd of April, subject to discussion with the Director of Planning and Chief Executive about an officer coming with me to answer questions. There was no mention of pre-election issues at the time. We received the above statement a few hours ago, and Harborough District Council were aware of the Leicestershire County Council's 1st of May election when they decided to set the 6th of May deadline for submission to the councils. Harborough District Council could have elected to extend the consultation period for some weeks, and so we would have held our meeting well after the election. David Atkinson was asked to substitute Councillor Gorton at the last minute, and we are very grateful for him to attend because, frankly, he had a few hours to prepare. So it's my pleasure to introduce David, Director of Planning at Harborough District Council. If you look at his CV, he has decades of expertise in the planning area. And I would remind you that as a non-political civil servant, David is dedicated to implementing government policy, as in don't shoot the messenger, please. David.
Thank you very much, Henri. So it really is a genuine pleasure to be here this evening and for you to invite me here this evening to speak to you. I wanted to say before I start the presentation, really, I understand and my colleagues at the council understand the passion that people have for their local area, and it's not just in this part of the district, it's in all parts of the district. We've had a fantastic turnout, if that's the right word, at our drop-in events, as we call them, across the district, only concluded last night. So it's been great to see I've been in places where it's difficult to engage with people, and that certainly isn't the case here. We understand these people's lives that are affected here, and myself and my colleagues at the council do understand all of that. So, to get into the presentation, national context. So, national government introduced significantly increased house building targets. New draft local plan is a response to those. It deals with targets set by the national government. I think it's really important to understand that at the outset. There's a strong national commitment, and some of you may have heard and seen statements in the House of Commons in recent months and weeks, to build 1.5 million new homes in the current Parliament. Deputy Prime Minister in the House of Commons said all councils across the country must play their role in delivering this. So part of that greater effort, if that's the right term. So we're no different. The council signed the Leicester and Leicestershire Statements of Common Ground, and I'll try and avoid acronyms and sort of abbreviations as much as possible, in December 2023. And that meant that preparing a new draft plan in 1 year since then, more or less, about 15 months, we are eligible to go under the transitional arrangements, and that's geeky language for saying we could go under the old December 2023 National Planning Policy Framework, which means we have to allocate new land for about 6,500 new homes, which is 2,000 fewer than would have been the case if we'd gone under the new National Planning Policy Framework of December 2024. So quite a bit on some of these slides, I apologise for that. It's important, I think, for me to explain. The draft strategy of the new draft local plan is to locate development in sustainable locations, close to existing services and facilities, and that was clearly an outcome that came from the consultation we ran at what's called Reg 18, Regulation 18, previous stage, to the one we're at now. Allocating new development in or close to main settlements of the district to enable that principle to be delivered. Development is distributed across the district, close to those supporting services and facilities. And it's important to say it's not all allocated to Great Glen, land south of Gartree Road, east of Oadby, whatever you want to call it. There are 5 other main allocations as well: north of Market Harborough, east of Stratton, Waterleys, the Kidworths, and the one that you might be most interested in at Great Glen. So the plan doesn't target Great Glen or any other part of the district. It's made up of a spatial strategy to deliver development across the district in those most sustainable locations. For example, 1,000 new homes north of Market Harborough, 950 at Stratton, 475 at Waterleys. You can see the numbers there. I don't need to read them all out. Importantly, only 320 at Lutterworth, but that's when you need to factor in 2,750 at Lutterworth East, as we call it imaginatively, carried forward from the previous local plan. So a little bit more detail on the site that we're probably most interested in tonight. Strategic development area, cross boundaries, Henri has already said, with Oadby and Wigston, 4,000 new homes in total, of which 3,150 in the Harborough District. But, and it's a big important but, 1,200 are programmed for delivery in this local plan period up to 2041, should have been space there, up to 2041. In the trajectory, it's around about 2033 that we're programming to start, so not immediate. So it's not as if we're going to be out there with spades in 18 months' time and out of the ground going to come these new homes. 5 hectares for employment, 5 hectares for travelling show people. The detail is in the policy. That equation roughly relates to about 100 to 150 a year in the current plan period. Key infrastructure benefits, hopefully, to the delivery of the plan. So 2 new secondary schools, that's really quite groundbreaking. Not very often any plan across the country will deliver and achieve 2 new secondary schools, one south of Gartree Road, one north of Market Harborough. More normal to have a number of primary schools, they're there too. New primary health centre, again quite groundbreaking, not very often we achieve the critical mass to deliver one of those. New cemetery, north of Market Harborough. I wouldn't use the cradle to grave. The plan really is planning for everything across all life stages. Major developments require sustainable urban drainage. I know in the district we hear a lot about flooding. Sites over 400 dwellings are required to have a master plan. Policy of 40% affordable housing, so people can get on the housing ladder. 2 areas of separation. Importantly, the plan is about environmental protection as well as development delivery. Between Oadby and Magna Park, which is also proposed for some expansion, and here locally between land south of Gartree Road and Great Glen. And a 20% betterment on that runoff rate, as I was calling it, quite groundbreaking again, that we're trying to achieve, we're aiming to achieve in policy, 20% betterment on runoff on greenfield sites. So by moving quickly, we deliver a plan less than 2,000 homes, fewer than we would have done if we delayed its development. National house building targets have been increased, as I've already said. Not to progress and adopt quickly, we would face a period of speculative development. So there's a potential and a chance for the market to do this to us, rather than us having a chance to deliver and manage and regulate the delivery of the development through our local plan. And we could have that speculative development in the new system. There's a whole raft I could talk about all night about the new system to 2029-30. There's detail around that why we come to that date, but it could be then. And that could be resulting in a loss of local control over where development goes for that period of time, which the district has experienced before and I've experienced that as well. So not progressing the local plan will result in significant loss of investment, obviously quite expensive things to produce, quite a lot of professional time, and it would mean you have to start again. So quite a lot of money would have to go into that. It's not premature, I would suggest, in the light of what I've already said, and ought to be in place as soon as possible, really, to manage the delivery of development across the district, so we don't have uncontrolled speculative development for any period of time, or not for a long period of time. The other key messages: still meeting housing needs, public and open space in the plan, community and leisure facilities, supporting infrastructure. We've got what's called an infrastructure delivery plan, again an imaginative name, which sits alongside plans online, and that will take you through some of those infrastructure supporting elements. County Council and other stakeholders feel that infrastructure challenges are mitigatable with ongoing work with them. We're still working, and obviously the plan's still a work in progress. And are very positive ongoing discussions are taking place between officers of all of those both of those councils and other infrastructure deliverers. I've already mentioned new educational facilities, new job and employment I've mentioned, and protecting the history of the district. Obviously a hugely historic district, many historic villages with conservation areas, equivalent to the quality of the villages we probably have in the Cotswolds, for example. High quality placemaking. The government have increased the emphasis on placemaking, urban design, all of that they used to call it beautiful places. They've stepped back from that, that's a bit tweaked probably, but they're still very high on urban design and master planning for all new sites, creating places, not just estates. Planning applications will of course be required to further determine the delivery of those applications, those sites, and that sits alongside master planning. So there's many, many stages to go before, I should say, a spade hits the ground. Climate change is important. We've talked about flooding already, and we know we have to enhance geodiversity and biodiversity through the biodiversity net gain proposals and also the local nature recovery strategy. So, before I close, key stages of forward plan making. Report period of public consultation ends on Tuesday, the 6th of May. That will lead to the analysis of the responses. Reports back to Cabinet in the autumn, could be a little earlier than on that slide. Council will then decide whether to submit to the planning inspectorate for examination. They then take over, and potentially hearings mid to 2026. Report then prepared on the plan. Council then goes back to Council to decide whether the Council wants to submit the plan for examination, and then we move to final adoption late 2026, early 2027, and Council will decide whether to adopt the plan. Genuinely pleased, and thank you for inviting me here this evening. Work is in progress. Councillors will consider representations, as I've just said, on the plan. Public consultation is very much open. Make appointments on the soundness of the plan. There's the website. There's a telephone number as well if you need assistance. And these different and detailed stages are yet to come. Master planning, planning applications, where detail will be worked up and these principles will be developed further. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for listening, and back to you, Chairman.
So on time, fantastic, so thank you for that. We've collected a few questions, David, so I think if you could stay there perhaps with the microphone as we get a few questions. We've been allotted an extra 5 minutes to ask questions, so we've collected questions quickly since we didn't know that David was going to be coming here yesterday evening, before yesterday evening. So the first question that there is here is, because of the lack of delivery of Lutterworth East and Stratford North, it appears that Harborough District Council is already facing a prolonged period of speculative development because it doesn't have its 5-year land supply. Could you please comment on that?
Yes, of course. So the two sites referred to there have been affected by viability, events. When the council adopted the local plan, the current local plan 2019, those sites were very deliverable in the housing trajectory to deliver on time or on target. Various events have happened, world events, Brexit, wars, economic shocks, COVID, and I don't know the technical detail on the issues that developers have had, but essentially they face challenges in those delivery. So it means that we need to deliver a local plan really quite quickly, because that will get back control of the agenda. So we're probably looking, I'll be honest here, we're probably looking at 18 months or so of speculative development if this planned targeted timetable is delivered. But we don't have any longer, so if we were to sort of start again under the new system or go to start again on a new plan now, as I've indicated, it could be 2029-30. But if we carry on with the momentum we've developed, we should be able to limit the period of speculative development to 18 months, 2 years at the outside.
So does that mean that for the next 2 years or thereabouts, a developer could come up and make an application for 100 to 200 homes?
Yes, indeed, and they already are. So we're already engaged in pre-application discussions with developers that are, spotting that. And obviously Harborough District is a desirable place to live, as our residents here will know, and developers know that. So yes, in short, yeah.
Thank you. The next question is around you say that by getting on with the local plan, you are having to provide 2,000 fewer homes than would otherwise be required. But it appears that there is a 16% buffer already for the 2041 numbers. Harborough is a delivering authority, and a more conservative 5% buffer would mean 1,200 fewer homes. What are we over-providing as a district council?
Right, so when the inspector examines the plan, as you said at the introduction, what we're aiming to do here is satisfy the inspector that the strategy is sound in every way. So if we were to go to the inspector and simply say, right, here's the exact number of dwellings we need, he will probably turn around to us and say, go away, and that's not a particularly sound strategy, because as we've already sort of reflected on, there are two major sites in the current local plan, 2011 to 2031, that haven't delivered what they were meant to deliver. So the inspector will say, you need to include in the plan some contingency. You need to include buffer, contingent, whatever you want, adjective you want to use, for sites that don't perform or don't deliver for whatever reason through the plan period. There's a whole, any kind of reason can intervene. So that is why it's always suggested 15 to 20%. They're exactly the same in the last local plan, one we adopted in 2019. There was a buffer to deliver for coverage of sites that didn't perform.
The Harborough District Council is over-delivering today, is that correct?
We've been successful at delivering, and we've been particularly successful at delivering in the early part of this decade. And by starting the plan period in 2020, we're seeking to bake in that successful delivery period to try and bring that control and reduce the housing numbers even more, because we want to get full value from the high levels of delivery the district's already achieved in that period. So that's the reason, in many ways, as well as it being logical for other reasons, one of the reasons to start the period in 2020, so we can bake in the full value, and that will be something to consider in the examination, but that's the reason, one of the reasons for doing it.
Thank you. And this is a question from David Campbell-Kelly, who knows about spatial strategy. So his question is, the spatial strategy for Harborough District Council does it to a degree focus on location close to supporting services and facilities, but Stretton Hall and the area around Great Glen is a strategic development being driven by a flawed strategy, flawed strategic growth plan, I should say. Where is the expressway upon which this plan depends?
Well, one of the conversations we're having with the County Council is that the plan evidence base is overly reliant on roads and over-reliant on junctions. So what the County Council and the new National Transport Strategy is doing is moving away from some of that predict and provide, as it's called, without colloquialising it, and moving more towards sustainable travel patterns. We know what they are, what's happening in public transport, reducing the need to travel altogether, working from home. So we're actually still engaged in conversations with the County Council about how we deliver development in ways that aren't totally reliant on the public highway. and aren't sort of are totally focused and fixated on we need to provide everything on a very hard and fast tarmac rule to deliver growth.
So look, I think it would be great to actually see if there are any questions from the audience now, before we move on to our local MP. Any questions? Oh, there's a question over there.
Could you just clarify?
I am. So recording this, so we want to make sure that you have that on sound.
Hi. Could you just clarify for me what you meant on one of the slides about provision for travelling show people?
Yeah, the government set out the types of housing we need to provide for in the plan. And there are types of housing need that are never popular in planning delivery terms. So travelling show people is one of those. It's basically seen as by national policy as a group of people who support fairgrounds, shows, have equipment, fairground rides, so on and so forth, that will travel around the country. And one of the types of housing need we need to satisfy in the plan are for needs of those. And the independent evidence that establishes for us the different types of housing need, and that's one of them.
Thank you. One more question, and I think we'll have to stop.
Can I just ask then, are all the other councils being asked to provide that sort of housing provision?
All councils across the country are working under the same national planning policy, national policies, yes. So yes, in short, madam, yes. All around Leicester will be each new local plan, and there's a number of councils are going under the 2023 national planning policy framework. Ourselves, Leicester City and Charnwood, and other councils will be bringing their plans forward under the new national planning policy framework. So yes, there'll be housing delivery across all of those councils. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to thank you for coming here and accepting to take some of the potential heat. I think everybody's been very, very kind, and certainly for stepping in last minute. So if you could thank David, that would be fantastic.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time this evening to come to this hugely important public meeting, which will have a huge impact on our area for, as David was saying, decades to come. Now, the image, I'm not going to go through lots of maps, we've just gone through some of them, but just to get to a few points we haven't picked up so far. This is, broadly speaking, the outline of the large single site. We talk about a new town. This is it for now, though it's part of a bigger thing. That's the boundary of the site. It wraps all the way around Stretton Hall, and it comes quite close to Great Glen. These are the owners of it. The blue bit is the bit the government owns. The red bit is what was the old co-op land, and there's another private individual with the green bit. On top of that, there's also another site that's a bit closer in to Great Glen, both to the new estates off of the London Road, and also to Blackthorn. So that red area there is on top of that big single site as well. So that brings it in a bit closer to the village as well. Now, we can see this side, this is on the Harborough side, but one of the crucial aspects of the whole thing is that it spills over into Oadby and Great Glen. It's also affected by development in Oadby and Great Glen as well, and naturally enough, perfectly reasonably, the councils produce maps for their own areas, but they don't look across what's happening into the neighbouring councils. So this map, which I've made, puts together some of the sites that are on the Oadby and Great Glen side of the borough, and you can see that adds to the impact potentially on the A6. As you all know, there's a single lane heading up into Oadby, up in the A6, and so to put this amount of development onto that effectively single lane would be a heavy load onto that already very congested artery. This is just a bit of a wider map, just to go back to this again, to show you that there are choices facing the Harborough District, right? So the orange thing you can see there, right up at the top, the middle top there, is number 72, is the big development that we are talking about. And the rest is the Harborough District. And you can see that there are other largish sites in the district. So a red square you can see there on Kibworth. There's some large sites just north of Market Harborough, and there are bits and pieces elsewhere. But really, the Newtown that we're talking about is the kind of the big site in the plan. And there are not endless choices, but there are choices about where development should go within Harborough's new local plan. So this is just to put things into a bit of context. Now, Henri asked me to put this discussion we're having here locally in a little bit of national context. And this map shows you how the new government has changed the housing target for each area. And what you will see is the blue areas are the areas where the numbers have gone up, and the red areas are the areas where the numbers have gone down. And you will see that all of our cities are experiencing large reductions in their housing targets, and shire areas see big increases, particularly in the north, but also elsewhere. So Harborough's housing target has been increased by 42%, Oadby and Wigstone's has been essentially doubled at 97%, and meanwhile Leicester, you can see Leicester is in red, Leicester's target is down by 36%. So a real move away from urban focused development towards a more kind of shire and greenfield type of development overall. And it's that huge change that's caused the problems that David is describing. That's why in January Harborough District announced that it no longer had a 5-year land supply. Previously, Harborough was being expected to build 510 homes a year, and they had enough land on that basis because they had land for just under 2,700 homes. They had 5 years worth of land, but of course now that the government is expecting a much larger number, 723 a year or 759 with that 5% buffer, that is no longer 5 years, and that's why the council has not completely lost control of planning, but has far less control over planning than they otherwise would do. And this thing called the presumption applies, effectively inviting lots of speculative applications for development in our area. Now, there are definitely some uncertainties around what is going to happen. So one set of uncertainties is about what will happen with the district's plan. A lot of you will have seen this week's Harborough Mail or the Leicester Mercury, the county council's initial response to the district's plan, particularly about transport, where they are asking a lot of questions about the transport impacts of this plan, which does see a huge amount of development and a lot of the way put onto that A6 artery. Because if you remember the previous slide, a lot of development north of Market Harborough, big new chunk of development in Kibworth, which is itself expanded, loads of development all around Great Glen and Stretton Hall, all funneling up that one artery into the city through effectively one lane, and then around a bunch of roundabouts and so on and so forth. So that is why you are getting this reaction from the county council. And I am not in that process, I'm not a councillor or an employee of the council, but obviously the back and forth between the county and the districts over these issues, it creates uncertainty about what will happen and how quickly we will be able to resolve this period where we have effectively lost control over planning. And that really brings me naturally on to where in a sense you can come into this discussion. Because, as David said, the consultation at the moment is open for you to all respond to until the 6th of May. And I hope that people will, on a big scale, and I think Henri is planning to say something about that and how he and the campaign group can help you to put in on-topic submissions that actually address the legal and planning issues, as well as our own local concerns here. But naturally enough, there will be concerns about the impact on transport, and there's a complexity here for all of us. We have to get our responses in as individuals by the 6th of May, but we won't really resolve this back and forth between the county council and the district council, I think, by then. So, in a sense, we will have to do as good a job as we can to make and to highlight these issues. I mean, that very large development, if I just go back a bit to the map of it, you can see that you've got two potential ways in. When we had a previous discussion, Simon Dalton, who's the lead council on these issues, talked about the traffic may be coming down onto the A6. Potentially it could go out into the Gartree Road as well, but of course, as you all know, that is incredibly congested at rush hour and leads to a lot of congestion and rapid going through Great Glen. And it is worth saying that although this site itself will build out over a long period, and only part of the 4,000 homes will be delivered even in this long planning period, it is only part of a much bigger thing, because the owners of the land, I've had the presentation from them, are very clear that over the longer term they will develop the rest of their land. And as everyone knows, if you imagine that sort of semicircle you've got there in red is the bottom half of, or bottom third of, a bigger circle, that is the wider estate, which over time will also itself, the developers hope, be developed. So, in a sense, the issues that this part of it throws up will only be compounded later on when the rest of it eventually comes forward for planning permission as well, probably the next plan or whatever that. So, lots of issues about transport, and of course, as you all know, as local residents, huge issues about flooding and the like. We obviously had another very sad episode of serious flooding in Glen at the start of the year. The village is the confluence of both the Sents coming down from Bilston and also the Burton Brook, also coming down from Bilston, but via a different route. And this large development, you can see it's got a wiggly edge on its right-hand side, and that, of course, is caused by the Sents. So it's all boundaries, the Sents. And I have said one of my suggestions about how we can change the draft of the local plan is to be much clearer that all new developments, if they are going to go ahead, have to reduce the amount of runoff, not just absorb their own runoff, but reduce it. And at the moment, the plan says both, so it's a bit ambiguous. So we can address that. I've had suggestions as well about this target to have 40% social housing on all the sites, and whether we should instead spend some of that resource on amenities for existing residents rather than more. I'm all in favour of some degree of council housing as part of these things, but whether some of that, there's a large amount of money, should be going to facilities to close the existing infrastructure deficit that we've got here, I think is one of the points I'm certainly thinking about the local plan. But anyway, these two issues that I'm raising, both the transport, the flooding and the like, are some of the things that Henri will be talking about in a moment. But there's also just a wider question about, there are choices here. And the district's current plan is to concentrate a lot of that development into this one very, very large site. That is a choice. It's a choice for local councillors to make, but it is a choice, and there are other places that the development could go. And so that is one of the big issues that we might want to talk about, and that you might want to put into your submissions. But look, I've spoken too long. I'm happy to take questions towards the end, but I'm going to hand over now to Henri. I mean, can we have for Henri for organising all this brilliant event around the place?
Well, thank you so much. Neil is staying with us, so we'll have for the Q&A and the question time that Harpal over there is going to organise for us. So you already know who I am, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down with some slides with some pictures a little bit here. So let's have a look at where we are here. So you can recognise this is an aerial map. You can see Houghton on the head, top right hand side, Keyworth bottom right hand side, Oadby on the left, and we're right bang in the middle. That's where we are today. If I overlay the overall map, and this is not going to happen overnight, it's going to be like a log, I think that was the description, it's going to be like a log on a fire where every year it gives a few hundred homes. And they won't appear just all in one block, they will appear at the different blocks all the way up to Houghton on the hill. You can see Newton, Harpal and everything else. And I think what Neil was saying earlier is entirely correct. You then fill the blank in between the two, you're back to the new town that was kicked out in 2008. So we're still in the middle there, and we've dug out some reports which came out a few weeks ago, which basically show the infrastructure and the build-outs of infrastructure, including the development for access, foul water drainage, etc., at a cost of 40 million. I would ask you to keep in mind that 39.8 million pounds for in a few minutes. So the reason why we don't agree with this is not because we're NIMBYs and bananas, it's because at the strategic level, the spatial strategy, so the location of things is wrong. And when you have wrong strategy, and we've heard that we're moving away from building in cities, that drives me someone crazy, because the most energy efficient thing is to actually build where there are lots of people as opposed to concrete over farmland. So let's have a look at the 2018 Strategic Growth Plan map. The green blobs, kind of the inverted teardrops, that's where there's work. And we are where there's a red dot. Now, the 2018 plan saw a high-speed link, which is that kind of dotted line that goes, from north all the way down to the south via our local area, which is still where the red dot is, or the red circle is. And interestingly enough, that was cancelled by Midland Connect in 2020. And the kind of red, the crazy red lines that you see there is a modelling of what the traffic is going to look like. So, those who like the M25 and get parked on the M25 around London on a regular basis, you're going to have that around the local area, not just on the M6. Look at the modelling. This is modelling that's being paid for by Harborough District Council and also the Leicestershire County Council. So, it seems to me that the report from the Chief Executive of Leicestershire County Council on March 2025, or March 18, 2025, in response to the Harborough District Council, was saying that without mitigation, these impacts might be considered as being severe, as per Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 116, whatever that paragraph is. And from an asset management, it will increase the level of damage to routes. I heard recently that routes and roads are a little bit like trousers. You can only put patch so many holes. After a while, you need to rebuild them. And we're going to have lots of roads with trousers with lots of holes. And so when you start to think about that, you then look at the detail on what it looks for the local area. Well, there's also modeling for that. It was page 98 of the 398 pages documents that we've unearthed. Thank you to some of those who pointed those out for us. All the black dots and the red dots are places where you already have 75 to 100% capacity of the road system. So we're going to go through a little bit of a thought experiment here for the sake of argument. We're going to be traveling from Great Glen to, let's say, work in the centre of town. And that's about 7.2 miles, 18 to 35 minutes on average, it should be, right? And the way to get there is, well, hang on, there's a roundabout not far from here getting to Oadby. That's at 8:30 in the morning. And then at 8:50, I'm still not in the centre of town, I'm at Stonygate, and this is what I'm seeing. And then people are going to say, fantastic, let's go via Gartree Road, via Great Glen, right? So this is what it looks like. I'm in Great Glen, I'm going down the road. It's a one-part car parked, right? So I can only go down one side. I'm now, and this was taken out of shot way outside of the peak hour, right? I'm now in front of the post office. Anybody who goes there in the morning to try to actually get through that, good luck. So now I'm going towards the bridge, a bit further towards the airport. It's a single lane bridge. Then eventually I get towards Thornby and I get to Shady Lane. This was the only time when there's any traffic on there. This is it's a lovely road, but it's super dangerous and it's absolutely chock-a-block. And you can imagine 10,000 extra cars going onto that road system, good luck, right? And then if you go towards Kings Norton, that's not me on a bicycle, but it could have been me. I ran over a few years ago and broke my collarbone, but essentially that is not exactly high-speed roads that you're going to get, right? So that's basically what we are dealing with. So now let's assume we're going to go to Magna Park. We're going to go to Market Harborough first. So I'm now going to Market Harborough, and it should take about that long amount of time. And well, I hop in my car, and oh look, 1828, 1819, I'm on the dual carriageway going to single carriageway into Kibworth. About 9 minutes later, I'm still there, and I'm just moved to the single carriageway, and that's me going to Kibworth. So, well, let's think that we are now going to Magna Park, the other place where we're supposed to do lots of work. So now I'm going to go there. There's a brand new bridge if you go towards Fleckney and Kilby. There's a brand new bridge across the Redway. It's single now, a single lane. And about 300 yards later, there is the bridge above the Grand Canal, which is, I don't know about you, but you can't even see the car on the other side, and it's still single lane. So good luck to actually get there on time for your job. Now this is what happens, and this is from a lovely little transport from new homes, or a little group, you can find the information. What you have when a greenfield site development is put in a poor location for sustainable transport and are car dependent, this is what we've got. And if you look at some of the developments in Oadby and some of the development in Great Glen, that's what they look like. Because we've been leafleting around, a lot of people have 2 to 3 cars in front of their house because they need to get to work, right? So that's what's going on. Now I'm going to go a bit detailed because we're constructing a case which will make available for all of you to be able to submit that case in your own name to the council to say this is why we oppose things. The sums don't add up. Right, so, and that's quite important because this is actually driven by commercial development. Commercial needs to make money. I'm not going to bore you to tears with spreadsheets and everything else, nor the residual land value, the benchmark land value, all of this stuff that I didn't know about 2 months ago. And this is part of a 398 pages report. But what's important to note is the right-hand side column is the assessment. At the top, the 1.1 billion or thereabouts is the total value of the scheme for the developer. So you say, oh, there's lots of money to go after. And then they have to take out and take away, deduct essentially certain cost structures away from that. Their profit, the amount of affordable housing, which contributes 0 to profit, etc., etc. And then you find to the bottom right-hand side there, circles, negative numbers. And below that is written marginal. So the punchline is that Harborough District Council has paid a lot of money for these reports, and you will recall the 39.8 million pounds development cost for building some stuff around. Where is the money going to come from? So Harborough District Council's own advice shows that it's marginal and says that they recommend not to allocate this site. So where will the cash come from? Well, there's a risk there, of course, is that as soon as Harborough District Council says I'm going to do that, then there's a risk for them to be ransomed by county council or other to basically twist their arm to go and do some different things around this side because there's actually simply no money. So where will the cash come from to do the expressway that doesn't exist? The Capeways backwards that doesn't exist, bypass that doesn't exist either. Double carriageway into London, into Leicester. 5-year transport subsidies for proper. We hear what are we going to be all on our bicycles? Very healthy, but I think with the local traffic it might be dangerous. Upgrade Gartree Road, improves the station road towards Magnet Park, GP surgery, schools, nurseries, sewage treatment, flood mitigation, etc., etc., etc. Now, when you think about that, that sounds very exciting, and you can actually treat the numbers. You can say, I'm going to reduce the amount of affordable housing. Now I'm improving the profitability, and you'll see that's exactly what happened in Lutterworth East. Now, all of these things sound very interesting, but actually they have real consequences. This is a photograph that I took at a local GP surgery in December last year. That's the reality that we have today. So if you have no money for services, you could be the GP, but as someone, I think, who went at the Great Glen little drop-in session, the official said that we might be in the thing, but we don't know if a GP will be able to turn up. So that's one thing. The second thing that happens when you don't have any money for infrastructure is this. This is us in January. Not 15 years ago, not 200 years ago, this is us in January. So now I'm going to move to the planning sums, and that's the number of houses. They don't add up either. So, what does that look like? So we've done the sums, and I'll thank David for that, and his group. They're very detailed, so we're really glad that they're working with us on this. But bottom right-hand side, that's basically the question earlier. There's an over-provision for a district council that is over-delivering by 50%. There is no need for any buffer. And yet, to 2041, there's no over-provision of 1,667 homes. Why is that? Right? So, what's next? Well, the strategic sites that we heard from David already have some problems. There's no 5-year supply, so it's already kangaroo, you can just turn up and try to develop. As actually it's already happening around Fletney. 170 homes have been proposed. I can guarantee you they will be approved. Even adopting the local plan in 2027, so what we're talking about is for 2027 adoption, will not result in 5-year land supply upon adoption because of reliance on big, large strategic sites which take ages to get off the ground, and that's our beef. Scrap up north. Let's have a look at one of those. Okay. Well, it's predominantly due to the exclusion of a big strategic site like Stretton North is there, that we have an issue with the 5-year land supply. And it's been deallocated, it's about to be, or proposed to be deallocated on the ground of viability, or lack of viability, I should say. Why is that? It appears that about 10 years ago, people knew already that asbestos was on the site. And the planning then went ahead, it went through the process, and was allocated in the 2019 plan. Taxpayers' money was spent to do that exercise. It's not cheap, you can imagine that. And then it's the omission of this site, which primarily results in Harborough District Council not having any deliverable 5-year land supply. So large sites, when they go down, there are some implications. And there are similar clouds gathering around the site around here. It's already been described as marginal. You've seen the numbers. Unsound, premature, no golden thread back to the strategic growth plan, lack of transport soundness, unexploded ordnance, you name it. So why on earth spend thousands to millions of taxpayers' money to plough on with a strategy and promoting big site here when it makes no sense? Next, Lutterworth East, another big site. Big strategic site, planning consent, about 2,700 already planned for. Affordable housing target reduced from 40% to 12% to try to jack up the numbers. And the strategic supply basically is there and available, and yet no house will be built until 2032. If you brought that site forward a little bit, you would have hundreds of houses that could be built. And even the underperforming sites at North Loversport is delivering more houses. So why will the planning inspector, the next thing is to then understand what will the planning inspector look for. They look for something that is positively prepared, and there is a wording that the slides will be available afterwards. That is justified, that is effective, I should catch up, you are effective, that's consistent with national policy. And we only have a few objections, as in all of them are failing the test. It's not compliant, it's not positively prepared, it's not justified, it's not effective, and it's not consistent with planning policy. Why is that? Positively prepared, housing target too high. Not justified, no account for alternative spatial strategies. Remember the strategic growth plan with the green globe and the missing high-speed link? It's not effective. It's over-reliant on sites, on big sites, which don't deliver. We already have 2 examples out of 2. So the objections are very simple. It fails to all the tests, and therefore should be kicked out. So we're preparing a plan. Now there are clear alternatives, and I'll finish on that. The alternatives are very simple. Stop digging, literally. Address the spatial strategy. The Willoughby and Waterleys Resident Association has developed a strategic plan which is to the northwest of Leicester, where there's transport and everything else. And nobody's actually responded to that for 6 years, right? So does it make any sense? Next step is truly invest in local infrastructure up front. If you want to have a site here, then show the money. But where is the money tree? It comes from either the developer, commercial, or for central government. It can't come from the developer because there's not enough money, and it certainly is not coming from central government because there's no money. So you can address that by addressing the existing issues. You can basically fix the existing strategic sites you've got, together with the oversupply that gives you plenty of housing targets, so you don't need a 3rd site. In business, if you have an issue, and actually you have 2 issues on your hand, you don't do a 3rd issue before you fix the other 2. And that's exactly what's being proposed with the local plan. So fix the Lutterworth East, bring it forward online, combine that with the buffer, you don't need anything else. Thank you. So now we're going to move to not to call Harpal Willoughby, but maybe. So if I could invite the panelists on stage, that would be fantastic. So Harpal is a local resident. He's famous to be on BBC TV, so which is great. And he's going to be chairing our session. He's also a specialist information technology, program management, and business analyst. So if you need him, go and speak to him. Harpal.
Okay, thank you, Henri. So we're going to use the next 30 minutes to do a bit of a Q&A session. We've had, well, where you guys, the residents, get a chance to ask our panel questions about this development. Now, we've had a lot of questions come through on email, so we're going to start with a sample of those, and then we'll open it up to the floor after that. So, I'll call your name out. If you're here, a mic will come over and you can ask the question through the mic. If not, I'll read it out on my list. Is Harpal Baines here? Oh, Harpal, go ahead.
Hi, so my question relates to, I think we've got existing problems within Great Glen itself, and we're not solving those drainage and flooding issues, and this is all going to expedite into a huge problem that's going to have huge financial risks for businesses, houses, etc. So my question is what are we doing about the current problems before we even look at any developments, etc.? What are they doing to resolve this? Because this is just going to expedite into a huge, massive issue over time. And that's reality. If you look at East Gloucester, they did exactly the same there, where they had houses. They developed and developed, took away all the greenery, the surface water just went to the lowest point, and now you've got houses that never flooded. Those houses now are rendered useless. Insurers won't insure them, they've lost all the money, and people are sitting there with huge mortgages and huge deficits. So I think that's the reality of this problem, and it's just going to blow up into a bigger issue.
So I guess it's a hugely topical question at the moment. Henri, do you want to take this first?
Gosh, I'm not a flood specialist or surface water specialist, but as part of a development, you would expect to get the surface drainage to be calculated, and lakes and a whole bunch of different things basically developed to prevent the flooding. The challenge that I have is when I look at the numbers, and I do like numbers, it's difficult to argue, maybe in some lands 1 + 1 is equal to 5, I don't know, but certainly not here. And when I look at the developments and I look at the costings, I don't see any significant amount of money that is looking at that current issue and building the infrastructure ahead of putting some houses. And fundamentally what we're going to be told is wait until the developers are there, they're going to do the detailed planning, and then you'll know the answers by then. But of course by then the horse is galloping, the barn is on fire, and everybody's like me with no hair. So I think that's the issue, and there is no ability for us to actually pull that infrastructure forward, because of course the infrastructure budget comes out of the developers' overall infrastructure. And so that's why we're here, and that's why we're doing all these things, and that's why we're so grateful that you care, because it is important, it is people's livelihoods.
On the flooding issue specifically, so a few people here are probably involved in the Great Glen Flood Committee who are doing excellent work to try and make some progress on that issue. I have been firing away in the Chamber and Commons and ministers trying to get them to open up the kind of flood resilience funding that we got in the previous storm in 2024. They decided not to do that for various reasons, and so that source of money for individual home protection is not going to be available. And in all of our conversations so far with National England, it seems unlikely that we are going to get from them or from national government any significant sum to do some kind of big flood defences for Great Glen. So if it's going to be funded, if there are things that are going to be done that will make things better in the village, and obviously things are really bad, having had serious flooding twice in a row each year, then we do have to look to local resources and things like Section 106, which is the money that councils get given by developers when there is new development. That is one source of funding potentially. And so part of the answer is whatever we end up doing about this particular large site in the Harborough District Plan, it's really important that we get the rules on flooding in that plan right, so that each development is providing a net benefit in terms of reducing flooding, not just supposedly consuming its own smoke, which a lot of developments don't do. Because a lot of the things you can do to stop flooding are things you do upstream. They're not things that you do in Great Glen, for example. They're things you do in that whole catchment that's flowing down into Great Glen to slow the flow down, to create lakes and pools and so on. And for that to be possible, we need some initial work to be done. We all need to find some sort of source of funding. So that is partly a long-winded way of saying that we need to make sure that the local plan gets it right on flooding, but also the flooding issue is going to be a big part, I think, of objections to the new town, because I just cannot see that you can build that much stuff upstream of Great Glen and create loads of hard standing and new roads and buildings and so on, and it not reduce the ability of the countryside to act as a sponge and to slow the flow into Great Glen. I would love to see the modelling that shows that you can concrete over that amount of land and it not worsen what is already, exactly as you say, already a bad problem. And walking around, you've all done it, seeing people who've had sewage come up through their toilet, seen their house totally ruined. Things are bad enough already, and if you build this huge thing all around Great Glen, I cannot see for the life of me how you'll not make that worse.
Thanks. Sorry, David, do you want to introduce yourself and your expertise and maybe answer the question as well?
But about expertise. I am retired from working in volume house builders, so I have some development experience. In what would actually happen with the planning application, should the site be allocated, the planning application would be supported by a flood risk assessment. That document would be submitted to the Environment Agency as a consultee, and they would approve the mitigation that would be proposed within that flood risk assessment. Generally, that should allow for positively draining the 1 in 30-year storm. The 1 in 100-year storm can be controlled elsewhere within roads, but has to be designed so not to flood houses. The problem, of course, is Great Glen probably had the 1 in 100-year storm 3 months ago, and they are happening much more frequently. I was interested to hear what David Atkinson said, that they are looking for 20% betterment, and that would have to be baked into the flood risk assessment. Taking Neil's point, it is probably going to end up with huge balancing ponds within the development, and they would almost certainly be within green wedges, biodiversity net gain areas, and so on.
And in your experience, do they actually work?
A lot of the time you'll see these ponds and they're bone dry and you wonder why on earth they're there. They do work to a degree. I think that I would say that. But of course the 1 in 100-year storm should be very infrequent. And in any one person's lifetime, you may not even see it. So you may hope that you never see the 1 in 100-year storm. But as I say, they seem to be being much more regular.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on to our next question then. So Martin Ward. Is Martin here?
Resident of Great Glen, Martin Ward. Across Harborough District, we have 44% of the population, including myself, over 50 years of age. 22%, 1/5, are over 65 years of age. The life expectancy in Harborough, male or female, is an average of 81. Across the UK, between 22 and 2032, there are projected to be 17,000 more deaths than births, increasing annually. Harborough District, having an older population than the UK as a whole, our population will see more natural deaths than most other regions of the UK over the same period. So with an older average population in our district, combined with a declining birth rate in the UK, including Harborough District, the amount of available housing stock we currently have will naturally increase year on year. We'll potentially have too much available housing stock in 25 to 30 years, without any new developments for population. So my question is, who on earth are all these additional houses for? Certainly not the residents of Harborough District, Leicestershire, even the UK, with current awareness statistics.
Henri, did you want to have a response to this?
Look, I think there's going to be an element of district working together, and my understanding is Harborough District Council has taken on in the recent past some of the housing targets that Leicester City had. So that will contribute to the numbers here. My only comment I would make, which is a light-hearted comment, is I keep telling my wife that once you're above 35, you're always 35. So consider yourself into the 35 bracket. But seriously, I think there is an element of what Neil showed earlier, which to me makes actually no sense from an energy standpoint. You know, you want to reduce use of fuel, use of cars, build in central cities, don't build on concrete or the land. So I think it's an element of target shifted across the Harborough District Council, but I'll pass on to people who know better than I do.
Neil?
So since 2001, there's about a third more homes, a bit more than a third more homes in the Harborough District than there were. And so that as a rate of growth is about twice as fast as it is for Leicester City. And so Harborough has already been running much faster, developing much faster than the city, which is obviously it's kind of perverse from an environmental point of view, because that means more traffic jams, higher energy use, and having already delivered much faster than the national average and grown much faster than the national average, it does to me feel unfair for Harborough's target to then be increased even further. I mean, 42% increase is huge, even as Leicester's is further reduced by another 35%. And London's is down as well, so the math thing is London's target is being reduced by about 10% as well. So this is, as a model of development, I think is environmentally bad, I think it's economically stupid. You can even find think tanks are quite sympathetic to the Labour Party who think it's crazy because there's such a lot of demand in London to be shifting that demand. And the truth is that a lot of volume house builders prefer this model of development because the greenfield model, the fast turn model, you don't have to provide, you don't provide for the historic infrastructure deficits. You build the houses, you own the land for as little time as you can, and then you sell and you move on as quick as possible, rather than more complicated urban regeneration where you have to defragment land and knock things down and do things properly. And I do find it frustrating that the need has been shifted from Leicester to Harborough, when I meet developers who say, well, I wanted to build this thing that's 5 stories high in the city, and they told me I could only have 3 stories. And so the mayor says, oh, the wonderful historic skyline of Leicester. And I think, I've been to Leicester, right? And many beautiful buildings in Leicester, but a lot of the skyline is not beautiful. And the idea that the city can't anywhere go upwards or can't find any brownfield land for development, I think is nonsense. I think there's more effort needs to be put into the city. So look, I think the balance was already wrong and has, through the planning reforms the government have just done, has been made even more out of whack in a way that's sweet for some of the volume house builders, but not, I think, a good idea for the country in the long term.
And David, from an ex-developer point of view, do they actually look into the local demand?
Yeah, they do. And if they don't think they'll sell, they'll not build. If they think there's an oversupply, they'll not go and buy the site and develop it. No reason to doubt your numbers, Martin, but in those numbers I don't think you've taken account of net migration. And forecast net migration over the years will make an impact. I think it's important to understand in the housing targets, there's no real science behind it, any authority. The government has just said, I think the percentage is something like, for all the houses you have in your district, you will provide 0.82%, I think, per annum. That's right,
the old targets were based on population forecasts.
These
targets are unrelated to that.
Straight line, you will provide that number. And that's why places like Harborough have gone up and Leicester have gone down.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So the next question is from Fiona Wood, and she's asked me to read it out on her behalf. So, has modelling been done to explore the impact on transport links and commute times by building of the new town? Have they fully explored the impact, and what road infrastructure commitments will be made to mitigate negative impacts on an already very busy A6? Neil, do you want to take that?
So I think others are probably better placed, but people will remember when this proposal was called Henri Ecotown back in 2008, there was a recognition of the massive transport problems it would cause, and their solution to it then, however realistic this was they would build a tram from it into the centre of the city, so you would, at least would have very high volume, high capacity route into the city that wasn't just the A6. Now, I don't know if that was ever realistic or a sensible thing to do, but there was at least a plan or some attempt to address the issue in a substantive way, and I just don't see what that is now. It's, not all of the development is coming forward in this plan, but the problem, the plan is for that to come forward as well at some point. So how are we all going to get into the city? And I just do not see. I know there's clearly this very learned back and forth between the district and the county council. I just don't see any answer that is being proposed to that massive problem. But already looked at the modelling.
So there's a lot of detailed modelling, and you've seen some of the output there, which basically shows that we're going to be in gridlock, literally. What's very clear is that there are assumptions being made around people cycling, some new cycling lanes, and a whole bunch of different things. But fundamentally, if you build away from where the city is, the town is, the centre of town, people just naturally hop in their car and drive somewhere. And so in that way, we're all living only in foxholes, and that's how you destroy communities. And the fact that we're all here means that we do care about what the local community is, and we do care about whether or not people have taken care in terms of the modelling, not just to come to an answer saying I've got a number here and I can go over to it. So I think that would be my very uneducated answer to that. There is lots of modelling, we can point you to all of that. The fundamental issue is that you get back to a place which is constructed away from where people work, away from where people go and shop, and therefore there will be traffic, and there's not enough investment in infrastructure. Actually, there's no investment in infrastructure because there's no money.
David, did you have a view?
Just doing the second part of that question, what road infrastructure commitments will be made to mitigate the negative impacts? Well, the answer is we don't know. Because there is nothing in the local plan documents that tells us that. And that is evidenced by the County Council's consultation response. That response has already been approved by Cabinet. I don't know if it's yet been submitted, but I have no reason to think it will not be submitted as approved by Cabinet. And they have stated, and this is really quite important, the County Council are the transport authority, and they are saying in their consultation response that the Harborough District local plan is unsound. That is damning, in my view. And it is premature because predominantly of the transport mitigation that is required for a site like Stretton Hall.
Thanks, David. Next question from Rowena Thomas. Alex, just at the front here.
Thank you. Rowena Thomas, I'm a lifelong resident of Oadby, so I'm the other side, as it were. My question relates to the PAN development between the two authorities. The new town is a cross-boundary project straddling both Oadby and Rigston and Harborough. Are the proposals from each separate council codependent upon one another? For example, if the Harborough proposal doesn't go ahead, would this prevent Oadby and Rigston from progressing their plans over the border and vice versa?
Neil, yeah, you guys.
So I already mentioned there was a lot of uncertainty about the back and forth going on between the county and the district. And the County Council Transport Assessment looks at several of the southern districts together, so it looks at what's happening in Rigston and Willoughby together with what's being suggested in Harborough. So there is a view across the whole thing. To answer your question directly, there's no necessary link between Oadby and Rigston progressing its plan and Harborough progressing its, but a further uncertainty is that things in a sense are even worse in Oadby and Rigston because the government has increased their housing target so much, they've literally doubled it, that not only are they having the same issues about being in the presumption, they also have effectively gone all the way back to the start of their plan making process. So whereas David was saying, they hope that within 2 years they can start to get control back, though that won't happen immediately. In Oadby and Great Glen, they have been much more knocked back because they're so far away from the target. I mean, I really do feel for the council there because they're doubling of their housing target mix, and a difficult thing, basically more or less impossible. But so we don't know how many speculative applications will come through, not just in Harborough before this plan comes in, but also on the Oadby and Great Glen side. I mean, even in the plan, the great majority of the space, the green space in Oadby and Great Glen was being filled in, and it may be that the developers who really go for broke and try and fill in even more of it, and that is again just more load. And it's not just us here that will be affected by going up down the A6, it's really all of Oadby and Great Glen grinding to a halt as well. There's huge number of people trying to run through a very limited number of roads. I mean, it's wonderful that we are in the edge of a Roman city, but the problem with being a Roman city is there's just not many ways in and out, and that is going to be a big problem. So what's going to happen with Oadby and Great Glen is a further dimension of uncertainty about all this, but it doesn't stop them progressing. Things there are in a sense even more messy than in Harborough because of this humongous increase in the housing target.
I'm happy to take it. Yes, I think they are interdependent, and partly because a site like this has to have a critical mass if it's ever going to fund the infrastructure. So either one on its own, I don't believe, will be able to deliver its part without the other. So I do think it will be both or neither. Just picking up what Neil was saying about Oadby and Great Glen, David referred earlier to the statement of common ground where Leicester City's unmet need was allocated a couple of years ago. And part of the numbers that Harborough are providing for are a share of Leicester's unmet need they cannot meet. The numbers are so great to Oadby and Great Glen, I can see in their review of their local plan that they are just starting again. They will have unmet need, and there will be another statement of common ground having to unallocate that need to adjoining authorities. And I suspect that predominantly it will come to Harborough.
Okay, so our next question then is from Manjit Singh, who's asked me to ask on his behalf. So, the proposed development is not near employment centres, meaning that residents will be forced to commute to work either into Leicester, Market Harborough, or cross-country to Lutterworth. How will public transport and the already stretched road system be upgraded to accommodate this huge increase?
So I don't know if you hit, I only represent the middle third of the Harborough District, so I'm the MP for the middle part of it, Market Harborough, Glen, and so on and so forth. And so I should be careful about talking things that are outside my area, but I do think that the development at Lutterworth East is a very good idea, right? It's on the motorway, it's right next to the biggest employment centre in the area. It's an excellent thing. I think if that could be accelerated, that is like a model of development because it's got all the infrastructure and it's right next to it. And so it's obviously frustrating that for various reasons that is moving backwards. But I do think that is a very, very good point that Henri was making.
And what about from a funding point of view then? Who would fund the extra infrastructure for roads?
So there is a choice. And so Section 106, which I mentioned, which is effectively a tax on new development, that raises nationally something in the order of 7 or 8 billion. Even a few years back, it was raising 7 or 8 billion pounds a year. So this is like big money you're talking about. And the largest single part of that goes on social housing. Things like GPs, for example, or trade settlement is like less than 1% of the money goes on things like that. And so I do think that both nationally and here the balance is wrong between providing that. It is an important thing, nothing against advertising, but the balance is wrong. Too much of that important sum of money goes towards that rather than infrastructure for the existing residents, particularly I think in an area like this which has what I would call a kind of infrastructure deficit where there's been loads of sequential development and we've not had from central government the things to support that, even though we've run so much faster and hotter than most places in the country. I mean, I said that we had a third more houses in Harborough than 2001. That is way faster than the national average, and yet there is a gap that needs to be filled in.
Just picking up what Neil was saying, Section 106 is meant to capture funds for infrastructure and items that are directly affected by development. There is another way of capturing funding, and it's called the Community Infrastructure Levy. Harborough, I think every authority in Leicestershire, has chosen not to have a SIL policy. I do not understand why. Although I would just caution, by putting a further levy on development, you will make it even more unviable.
Just to add two more uncertainties. That section 106 is going to be replaced by a thing called the infrastructure levy over the next couple of years. And another uncertainty, which I didn't mention, is attempts by the City Council to expand their boundaries as well. And so most of you will know there is a proposal that's gone into government from Peter Salisbury, the Mayor of Leicester, to expand the boundaries of the city to include all of Oadby and Great Glen and all of Great Glen and the surrounding areas, so like Harpal and all this kind of stuff. Several of the villages.
And Willoughby Waterleys.
And Willoughby Waterleys. So it expands the city in all directions. And so there's a further complexity in all this is we're not totally sure who's going to be holding the pen in a few years' time and whether we are going to be part of, you will be sat in Leicester, technically, if that goes ahead. Now, I'm obviously totally against that and campaigning against it, whether the government will give him what he wants, I don't know. There is definitely a decent chance that they would.
I think it's just worth pointing out there are two other proposals for the redrawing of the boundaries. The County Council has proposed the city stays as it is and the rest of the county forms one authority. The districts and boroughs have proposed the city stays as it is and there is a north and south Leicestershire councils. I think the north includes Melton, Charnwood, North West Leicestershire, and I'm still not sure whether Rutland's in or not, but Rutland potentially as well.
Okay. Move on to the next question then. Next question from Christina Bray. Is Christina here?
And Christina is over there, is that right?
No? Okay, I'll read it out. Why can't the inner cities be utilised instead of destroying the habitat of our beleaguered wildlife? It's actually my favourite question, this.
Well, I'm happy to start with this
Go on,
one.
David.
Why can't the inner cities do more? And a good example is what happened in London Docklands in the 80s. And what happened in London was that a development corporation was set up. It was given planning powers, it was given compulsory purchase powers, and it was also given government money. And that is fundamental if you want to do major redevelopment that I think Leicester needs. There is no money for that to happen, and whilst it does not happen, we will see more sites like Stretton Hall.
So I'm very sympathetic to that. The only thing I'd add to it is just that some cities are doing it, right? If you go to Manchester, Manchester and Salford together, which are tiny, have delivered more housing than all of South Yorkshire, which is massive, right? So some cities are getting on with it and are regenerating themselves. So if you go to, I think you don't know Manchester, if you go there compared to when I was a kid, it is totally transformed and is growing upwards and now has a massively bigger population which they've brought to the city centre. What is the result? It's a very cool city, there's loads of young people there, it's the fastest growing place in the north, it has worked. So cities can do it, and it's not like Leicester doesn't have attractions, it's got a young population, it's had IBM Invest, it's 1 hour from London on a train, right? It could do more, and other cities have done more, even without money from the government, they've done a lot more than Leicester have done, I'm afraid.
How do we make it happen?
Well, my first suggestion was that we should not agree to accept the overspill housing from Leicester. We should push back more on that. I'm not going to relitigate all those arguments we had 2 years ago, but it's partly, I think, national planning policy level. So some of the changes the new government brought in at one stage about 2021 were some suggestions of a similar thing, which we managed to fend off at the time. The new government has pushed them through. So it's partly about national planning policy, and it's partly about fighting our corner at the local level, because as you say, there are going to be further discussions about past the parcel of who's going to deliver the need between different areas in the future. And there are other places, as well as other places within the Harborough District that we could develop, there are also other places within the county as well.
Thank you. Next question is from Andy Gordon.
Hi, Andy Gordon from Oadby. Do you think it's credible that a development of this scale could achieve the 10% biodiversity net gain that's required by the Environment Act?
In short, Andy, yes. It's hundreds of acres of predominantly farmland. The biodiversity on farmland is not particularly great. There will be areas of public open space. There's talk of separation areas. I am sure that there will be all the opportunities to create the necessary increase in biodiversity, in my view.
I know that Henri and David involved in this project are working on all these things. It feels at the moment like the strongest objections are going to be around transport, potentially flooding, just the whole balance of the thing. But I think those kind of things the developers will be able to address.
That's all the questions that were emailed in. I think we've got a hard stop at 8, but could we maybe take one question off the floor? There's a question here, Alex.
There's a question over there as well. There's a question there. There's 3.
Okay.
I'm here.
My name is Raj from Oadby. What I'm hearing is this is probably a futile exercise in terms of stop the new town, as it were. So my apologies to Dr. Henri for all the hard work you put in, but all I'm hearing is it's going to go ahead. Question go ahead and how? Am I right?
I don't think it's a certainty at all. I think there are really good arguments against it. The housing numbers are overstated. The biggest factor against Stretton Hall is viability. One of the reports, if you're going to go and look on the local plan website, go and find the viability assessment report and read it. Henri put it up about it being a marginal site. The text of the report is damning. It's one of the things that's very important for a piece of land to come forward with the landowners and the developer is in their agreement there will be a minimum price that is paid for the land. That price has not been disclosed for the authors of that viability assessment. Now, without that information, you don't know what is the lowest level that the land value can go to and whether or not it will ever come forward. And the report goes on to say, and I already referred to this, that large sites have the potential, if they get allocated, to ransom the local authority into reducing policy. And I think the strongest argument against Stretton Hall is viability. It does not work on paper. It certainly doesn't work if you have 40% affordable. We've seen the County Council have set a precedent at Lutterworth East by reducing from 40 to 12%, in my view, incorrectly, and a district should have stood firm. But that has set a precedent that means 40% affordable at Stretton Hall, if it happens, absolutely will not happen. What is also in its favour is there is no account in the viability assessment for Stretton Hall in that report for as yet undetermined county-wide highway improvements. We don't know what they are, we don't know what they cost, we don't know how the money is going to be collected. But it's in the report, in the infrastructure delivery plan, that those things are required and yet they are not costed in the viability assessment. The viability argument is very strong against Stretton Hall, in my view.
And that's the point. Is that I think we can all decide to join the fishing party and basically just not get involved. When you do the sums and when you do the detail, and there's a lot to read, you actually find it is unviable, it is unsound, and it is premature. Premature in the statement from Leicestershire County Council is to say that you basically given the answer before the evidence. And actually what really got my attention was a statement, I think, that Dhillon gave in Parliament in October, where the Housing Minister mentioned Stretton Hall as a development site. We heard nothing of it. So it feels to me like in business there's a joke that CEOs meet on the golf course, they agree on something, and then they ask the team to backfill what's the idea afterwards. And in essence, it feels to me like this. It is not planned in a way that makes sense, and We can be all emotional about it, but when you look at the hardcore numbers, it is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. That's what we all hear.
So the other thing I'd say is that the discussion I think already has influenced this. So that the bigger site, the whole site, the old court land, can do 10,000 houses, and yet they've only brought part of that forward now, 4,000, for lots of different reasons. And the site is very scalable, to use that word. It could be much bigger, it could be much smaller. And their concept, I've seen their sort of pitch for it, is that it's sort of a bunch of discrete developments. And that's how developers work. They have individual sites. They will only build at the speed that will keep the price up, keep the profits up. And so they like to have more smaller sites rather than a couple of big ones. And I think if you were the planning inspector looking at this, you say, look, this district's had these 2 big sites before, for various reasons the things have not worked out there, and their plan again is now a 3rd one. Whether you encourage them to go down that route, or whether you say, look, you can have something here, but it's not on this scale. So I don't want to be defeatist and say this is just about scaling it, but it is highly scalable. It doesn't need to be the size it is. As David said, the great majority of it is not going to be delivered even in this plan period, and there are choices about how much they get permission for in this plan. So I don't think we're at all wasting our time here. There's lots of different issues here, and we're still at the start of the search, and there's more issues emerging all the time. So I absolutely promise we're not wasting our time. Whether we'll succeed or not, I don't know, but definitely worth pushing.
I think it's worth just understanding the procedure. It is not in Harborough's gift to approve it. They have got to prove to an independent planning inspector that it is sound. That is, it more than anything is deliverable. If it's not viable, it won't be delivered. The inspector will not want to include it.
Okay, I think we've come to the end now. We've gone over 8 o'clock. We're going to have to, I guess, wrap up the Q&A. If you do have any questions that you want to send through on the email.
Don't leave. So there are a few things on next steps I will want to make.
Well, you go ahead then.
So I'm just going to go and quickly go through that. But first, before doing that, I would like to thank our panel. So before we all go, I'd like to make sure that we do file impactful submissions before the public consultation ends on the 6th of May. It's at 9 a.m. For those who submitted an objection to the Oadby and Great Glen call for a submission, it was at 12 noon. Here it's been moved to 9 o'clock in the morning. The 5th is a bank holiday Monday, so typically people will probably want to file that by the 2nd. So make your voice heard. Everybody can submit an objection, or if you object, of course, if you support, you can say that as well. You don't have to live in Harborough District Council to make that. And every adult can also submit something. So if you have a household of 5 people, you can make 5 submissions, not just the one. Just saying no or sending an email to your local parish council, otherwise saying I'm angry is not going to do anything. It will be interesting but not useful, is the way someone described it to me. So how to object in public consultation with our help? Well, we are preparing a comprehensive response, which is a document, I'm afraid it's quite thick, and we'll be sharing that ahead of the 6th of May, and make sure that it's available on the stopthenewtown.org website. Now, for those who are on our mailing list, you will receive a step-by-step instruction on how to utilize that material to submit an objection to the District Council. So for the next steps, I would ask you to make sure that others also know to go on the mailing list. Wait until you hear from us. It takes quite some time to actually write that, not quite finished, but with help from people, esteemed panel members, including David, we are making good progress. When the document is ready, we will email you the step-by-step instructions. So the last thing is I would like to thank all the speakers and the panel members
including David, who had to go for reasons that were explained earlier. I would like to thank the StopTheNewtown.org team for the work that they've done, the volunteers who leafleted, who are many beyond the little team that we have, and of course generous donation that we've had from the public to actually get all these things off the ground. And of course the Leicester Grammar School, and I remember that we have to be off the car park, so out by Harpal State. So on these good words, I'm going to say thank you. Please go and make sure that the mailing list is being distributed. Let's make sure that we're vacated by Harpal State, and then let's make sure that our local area looks like this for years to come, as opposed to a car park. Thank you.